If you ask me, Amir, I want to come to your office and talk about some of my assignments. Can you tell me where your location is? I'll say, okay, when the class is over, open the door, turn to your right, another right, then left, then right, then left. Get to this tall, ugly building called the tower, get on the elevator, push the button on the top, read the numbers, fourth floor. And then when the door opens, look for room 402. Knock on the door a couple times, and then I'll open the door. Language has not failed us. It's very clear, it's very articulate, it's very coherent. It gives you a great map. You ask a question, and you're well nourished now. And you follow the direction given to you through language, and lo and behold, you're in the office. Now, let's say you come to the office, and the truth is you didn't really want to talk about assignments. You wanted to talk about, all of a sudden, either you or someone very close to you having stage 4 cancer, and you want to talk about that. And you open your mouth, but all of a sudden you begin to cry. And sure, part of it has to do with the fact that you're not like a nurse who has been exposed to people, with stage 4 cancer all the time, and your skin is now tough. You know exactly what people go through, you know exactly what language you should use to calm people, to heal people, but you're not there yet. You're a novice, it's your first time being exposed to this particular disease that will eventually kill someone, if not yourself, someone very close to you. And you realize the emotions are so intense that language is not the proper vehicle to contain the emotions, so you break down. Sometimes you're very tough, you hold the tears back, but as you try to use language, it becomes very convoluted. You begin to mumble, and in the end you say, I'm really, really sorry, I know I'm not making any sense. I think the less experience you have in any walk of life, the more language is going to fail you. The more experience you have, and the more you've reflected on the experience. And that's one of the nice things that journaling or writing, the more you can play with words, and the more you can understand their function, and the more you can kind of express your ideas and emotions in words. After 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, then you can use language to your advantage. Now, there are certain parts of you that I think language will fail unless you do poetry. That's where the creative arts come in. I always go back to Guernica, or I always go back to The Scream by Edvard Munch. How do you express loneliness? How do you express living in a society that has become so uncaring and so callous? How do you express that people will laugh in your face when you express to them how much pain you're in? Well, the Bible has done so, Quran has done so, the Rig Veda has done so, the Dhammapada has done so about human ignorance and how you need wisdom to combat ignorance. But it's just too much, and it's too much work. And I'm just a talented painter, artist. So the best thing I can do really is grab myself a blank sheet of paper and just paint the screen. I live in this room with 50 people. آتش است این بانگ نای و نیست باد. That you ask me a question, and I'm not just stringing words together. I'm putting together my history, which is filled with pain and disappointment, some victories here and there, the fact that I'm getting a bit older and death is approaching me, the fact that as you get older you get sicker, and the fact that you want the best for your students, but the truth is no one can be forced to learn. And so it's a very pathetic and to some extent even disgusting attempt to bring forth something that can be brought forth. And so ultimately you resort to a couple of lines of poetry. درد بر من ریز و درمانم مکن چون که درد تو ز درمان خوشتر است. It seems that when I'm in pain, I can write poetry. When the pain goes away, I'm just stupid. So give me pain. And it takes a long time, because pain is not something that goes well with the human organism. And you must ultimately, I think, become profoundly intimate with pain and like it, because despite all the difficulties it creates in your life, it also makes you an artist. If you want to some extent, I suppose, understand the function of language a bit better, my recommendation would be this Austrian mathematician. His name is Ludwig Wittgenstein. He was a very strange fellow. If I'm not mistaken, his father was really rich, but really mean. 3 of his brothers were gay. They all committed suicide. Again, if memory serves me right, Wittgenstein enjoyed science, enjoyed math. He could whistle an entire score written by Beethoven, but he was never really a good musician. He didn't like religion, he didn't like philosophy, he didn't like ethics. He said, the only thing I want to do with my life is examine language, because it's language that keeps you hostage. You know, you want to fly, you want to express yourself, you want to be visible, but you realize language always fails you. And you realize that when you use language, other people fail you in understanding what you're saying. And he said, the only thing that people should really, really focus on is logic. It's like playing chess, becoming like a Magnus Carlsen of language. Why are you using this particular word? What emotions are you trying to convey? And are those emotions, can they be expressed well with this set of words? When I had met Hussein and I was contaminated by his ideas, I remember one morning, those days we had tape cassettes. I took out this huge box of tape cassettes of my favorite singers, Sattar and Daryush. I just dumped them in the trash. And my mom said, what are you doing? I don't want to see them anymore. I don't want to hear them anymore. Because of the ideas given to me by Hussein and some of the emotions, I realized that these old singers, these pop singers, were no longer doing it for me. And I found them to pollute my soul. So I gravitated towards traditional music. But you see, my mom was only seeing the outer expression, which is me dumping, the pop musicians into the trash. And when she asked me, I said, I no longer want them. And she was horrified and she screamed. But I didn't have the language to say to her, I met this man named Hussein, and he left this lasting mark in me. I am now interested in this other aspect of life, this other kind of music that expresses my emotions well. I was far too much of a novice, and I didn't understand myself. And I don't mean the spiritual self, just the emotions and the thoughts that live inside me, but I didn't have the power to bring them out nicely. The point of all of this is, so let's categorize language in three ways. One function of language is just the gossip of the day. Amir is sick. Amir is back. Amir is awful. It makes the day go by, and it's fun. And if you don't know the art of gossiping, you're not going to have a good marriage. You're not going to have good friendships. If your husband comes home and says, how do I look? Make the conversation last until midnight. Otherwise boredom will set in. You're going to look at the relationship and say, what am I doing here? Gossip. That's one function of language. The other function of language is you become a student of something, and you use language to find someone who's proficient, who can teach you the art that you're looking for. If you want to be a pianist, you get on your phone and say, I want to learn how to play the piano. How much do you charge? How often do I need to practice? How much is the piano? The other function of language is it's there to teach. So as a student, language has a very, very specific function. As a teacher, language has a very, very specific function. As a gossiper, language has a very, very specific function. Now, the problem living in society and having a bunch of friends is these three worlds begin to kind of mesh together in a very disharmonious way. So you're a gossiper, you go to a party, but there is a student of, say, piano, and they want to talk about piano, but you take it as gossip. So you entertain the would-be pianist. And because a student understands, and to some extent feels, they use their spidey senses, they know that they're not being taken seriously. A gossiper looks at the would-be pianist, the language don't mesh well. So the gossiper begins to offend the would-be pianist without really knowing. And after a while, the student, the would-be pianist, looks at the gossiper and says, please don't talk to me. I know you're not a pianist. I know you're not creative. I know you're not an artist. Just don't talk to me. Now, sometimes a novice teacher, for example, finds him or herself amongst gossipers. And someone raises their hand and says, what is the meaning of life? A novice teacher says, oh, a worthy student. As the novice teacher begins to kind of unravel the code, some of the, let's just say, the mysteries, the gossiper begins to laugh. And then the teacher looks at the gossiper and says, F you. So, knowing the time, knowing the place, knowing the space, knowing the people around you, They all give you clues as to what sort of language you should use. If you want to know someone who's very proficient, well, not really, but nevertheless, read the Gospel of Mark, for example. When he's with kids, he tells them stories. When he's with the rabbis, he tells them stories that they understand, it comes from the Talmud. When it comes with him hanging out with people, he tells them stories that relate to their occupation, so that they could maybe decode some of the symbolism in the stories. It's good to be a one-size-fits-all. It's good to be someone who's very profound, at the same time understand the different levels and stages where people live at or are at. And so you give to people what they can afford, what they can take. The only thing one can do is to create the proper space. Let's say that you want to invite me to your house. And let's say you like me and I like you. Let's say both of us are gay. Now, if you want to impress me, what you're going to do is you're going to create a proper space. You're going to clean your house. You're going to make good food. You're going to go somewhere and get some good food. You're going to turn on some candles. And then there's going to be some soothing music in the background. You create the proper space for this intimacy, this relationship to grow into intimacy. Now, whether or not I fall victim to this particular attraction, this particular space, that is what the name grace is. You and I have no control over it. You know, I can create the best space in this classroom. Whether or not you get it, it's really not up to me. And no one can do this. I think the best teachers, the only thing they can do is they can create the best physical, emotional, and intellectual space. There isn't much else that can be done. You either get it or you don't. And the truth is, it doesn't matter who the teacher is, and it doesn't to some extent matter who the student is. We have no idea how transmission takes place. We have no idea how all of a sudden transmission turns into wisdom. It really, for the most part, is a shot in the dark. Life, it's a complete failure, and language is part of it.